invited by you to be part of this panel. It's really an honor for me to be here. So my name is Chef Coco. I'm the chef patron of a restaurant called Epicure in Johannesburg. We do only Pan-African food. Pan-African food have been my, how can I say, my dream of type of cuisine that I want to showcase in South Africa and maybe later in other places, where we can show that African cuisine is not just something that need to stay at home in our kitchen. We can have a beautiful Pan-African restaurant and modernize the African cuisine, which is really needed. That's short of me.
Okay, and Coco, one thing, tell us where Epicure, your restaurant, is situated.
It's in Morningside, Sandton in Johannesburg.
Okay, thank you so much. Portia.
Thanks very much for having me here, Ishay. It's actually quite an honor to be here amongst some of these very, very popular and famous people. I'm Portia Mbau. I am owner of the Africa Cafe, which is in Cape Town. I pride myself in starting the first African restaurant in South Africa, and that was in 1992 during the apartheid stages. Very difficult for a Black woman then to start a business. I have recently written a book with my daughter called Food of Africa, Africa, Food from Around Africa. I've traveled extensively throughout Africa, and I learned from women who've actually taught me their recipes, and of course, also from my own family. Yes, that's me.
Thank you, Portia. Reuben.
Hi guys, yes, and Ishi, thanks for also involving me in this, especially during this time of reflection. So yeah, I'm Reuben Riffel. I'm chef and owner of Reuben's Restaurants. We started in Franschhoek, where we still have our restaurant. Used to be in Cape Town at the One and Only. We have a place in Johannesburg, and a small sort of like cafe style restaurant in the Waldeby estate. I'm also an author, so I've authored sort of 4 cookbooks, done a few TV things as well along the way. And yeah, I suppose, you know, my cooking style is sort of more eclectic. And I think part of the reason I'm here is also maybe to bring it back to something that's more sort of closer to me and feels more, a lot more authentic. You know, I think that's in a way how I started out. And I'd like to sort of get back in touch with more of my roots, I suppose.
Well, thank you, Reuben, and welcome. Karen, we're so glad to have you back. So for those of you who have joined us, which just before Karen introduces herself, I just want to remind you that we're looking at the topic that we're delving in today is my life in the kitchen, looking back and projecting the future. So Karen, please continue.
Thank you. Well, such a great pleasure to be with such distinguished panelists, and Ishay, as lovely as ever to see you. Such a pleasure. I'm Karen Dudley. I was the owner and the proprietress of the kitchen in Woodstock, which was a very, very well-loved establishment. For 11 years, we were in Woodstock, and a very well-loved place for our salads, and we did a lot of marvelous, delicious food for many years, yeah, I'm very proud of what we did, and but we've closed now, and we'll talk about that later. But I'm also an author. And I feel passionately about the industry, and so excited to speak to you, my brothers and sisters in the industry. And I think it's really a time to get the conversation really going, and for us to kind of give each other some love to move forward. Yeah.
Thank you. So to everyone listening in, I'd like to encourage you to get onto the chat box. Please feel free to leave questions, comments. I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of thoughts about what's happening in the restaurant industry. I think we can also all agree that we're very lucky today to be able to explore this topic from so many different angles, as you've heard from our chefs today. They're also in different stages in terms of their businesses, and it will definitely make, I think, for interesting listening. So starting off, I would like everyone just to share. I actually recall all of your stories, thinking back now, but I want you to share one formative experience that, you know, for you was it was the moment that you realized, I should be in the kitchen. I'd like to be in the kitchen. I can do this. This brings me joy. Portia?
Yeah, it started very early for me. My mom was always in the kitchen. My grandmother was always in the kitchen. I saw women always in the kitchen. In fact, when I saw, Chef Coco and Reuben, when I saw men in the kitchen, I went, huh, what's this? Because as far as I was concerned, women were the people in the kitchen. We were the ones that cared for the kids, that cleaned and washed and changed nappies. And at the same time, that's what I saw. So my earliest memories are of seeing both my mom and my grandmother in the kitchen. They were always in the kitchen, cooking, or in the gardening, cooking, and that's my earliest memories. And I loved. I mean, when I was little, I had a whole little set, a kitchen set, so to speak, a little stove, a little oven, all that type of thing. So I've always loved cooking. And but I didn't train in cooking. I went and studied abroad. I studied in fashion design, got my degree in fashion in the States, and came back to South Africa and actually struggled in that industry, and then went back to something I just really loved, which was cooking. So yeah, I love cooking. I love creating. I like taking stuff out of my head and seeing what I can do. But with that also an influence from just food that I remember that makes, when you eat my food, people say they cry. So I really with a lot of soul, and I put a lot of my heart into what I do, because I just love it. And I think it's not just a matter for me of working with food, but there's also this relationship I have with the ingredients, the actual where they come from. For me, plants, my second other interest is plants. So for me, plants are alive. So it's important how I communicate with them, and how I chop them, and how I slice them, and how I handle them, and how I wash them. So that's where my love for cooking comes in from that. That's my earliest memories.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Portia. So Coco, who apparently is not supposed to be in the kitchen, tell us a little bit about your formative cooking experiences and the thing that really inspired you to make a career of this.
So me, I always say, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now, I think I should change the numbers, that my cooking, how can I say, cooking career started, I think it's about 80 to 85 years ago. And when I say 85, it's 80 to 85, okay? When my grandfather decided to be a chef, and then he gave it to my mother. That's virus, but let's not talk virus. That passion. That passion. I was born in my mother's kitchen. When I say in my mother's kitchen, at the restaurant where she was working, which after became her restaurant, she broke the water while cooking, okay? Ran to the hospital, delivered the goods. 2 days after, come back in her kitchen, continue cooking. So for me, this noise of pots banging, the shouting, the screaming, it's really comfort noise for me. That's where I found my comfort. That's what, give me assurance. And that's why I love being a chef. And then from the young age when I was a kid, so there was no school holiday, no weekend. It was working in mom's restaurant. That's all I've, there's nothing else I've done except when I was a teenager. I want to be a bit rebellious. I say, you know what, no, me, I'm going to break this whole thing. I want to be an engineer. My mother, who was very clever, looked at me and says, you want to be a what? Maybe I didn't hear. No, an engineer. I want to do this. So, okay, it's fine. Tell me how much is your school fees and whatever. After your cooking school, you'll go, you'll come. Obviously, I'll give you a job during the weekend to work and pay your school fees. So you don't have to struggle to find a job. I have one for you. Fine. After 1 year engineer, I realized that maybe I should try to engineer something else in pots, in pans. And I came back. Unfortunately, just when I finished my hotel management school, my mother passed away, and I had to immediately come back and take over the restaurant. And that we're talking 26 years ago. Oh my God, it's that far. Yeah. So that's where my professional career started. And since I've done a restaurant in the DRC where my mother's restaurant was. Then I went to Ivory Coast, back to Belgium, and then I came in South Africa 18 years ago, which feels like yesterday almost. Yeah, I had a restaurant, small restaurant, 20 seats. That's where I started here in Greenside, Johannesburg. Then I took over a hotel restaurant, and then I created other restaurants until 2 years ago we created Epicure, which is a Pan-African restaurant where we do African food, modern African food from all over the continent.
Great, thank you. And Reuben, please tell us some of your formative or a formative experience that was the fuel for you to start your illustrious career in the restaurant industry.
Well, for me, I grew up, obviously, I was born in this town called Franschhoek. I grew up in a family that enjoyed sort of growing their own food. Vegetables, livestock, and all of that. I was kind of like born into that type of family. My grandmother, my grandparents had 12 kids. So, you know, we were all very close, almost everyone living in the same street. So you can imagine a lot of cooking. And they had to grow a lot of vegetables and a lot of livestock. And kind of, I grew up around people that enjoyed food. You know, yes, we bought certain things, but the bread was always freshly baked. My grandmother did it. Everyone else worked, gave money to the grandparents. My grandfather raised pigs and goats and planted potatoes and onions and all these type of things. And for me, that felt kind of normal. You know, I felt that was how everyone else was growing up as well. And I suppose later on, when my mom started to work in a restaurant, a kind of French-style restaurant here in Franschhoek, and she started to bring back like really delicious leftovers from their Sunday buffets. And, you know, I was kind of exposed to different flavors again, you know, like simple things like a potato dauphinoise, potato gratin, and rotisserie lamb, and creme brulee, things that we, you know, I didn't grow up with any of that type of stuff, but I was tasting it and I was like, what the hell is this? You know, this is just amazing. And eventually, you know, I was kind of like working in different, I started while I was during school holiday working in some restaurants as a waiter. And then I had another side of chefing, you know, where I saw, wow, but the food here is not as good as the food that my mom used to bring. And, you know, the chef guy is screaming and shouting all the time. And his rice is kind of dry as well, the star food, you know. So that kind of like put me off in terms of what the restaurant industry is all about. Yeah. until eventually I got a job working in the restaurant where my mom was working, and I saw a completely other side again. Yes, quite disciplined in terms of kitchen, the workings of the kitchen. But as soon as I got to know the chef a little bit better, his kind of passion rubbed off on me, and I still struggled in terms of understanding why I should be working these hours, public holidays, Christmas and New Year and all these type of things, where all my friends was going to the beach and I had to work. But I think for me, the one thing that happened was while I was working in the kitchen, my chef on a day wasn't there, and I had to, and this was now after working next to him for quite some time, maybe a year or so. And I was in charge of one dish that I had to go out to a customer. And I remember it was a springbuck dish, very simple, with a braised red cabbage, the jus and everything. And the guy, it was a French tourist, and he asked to speak to the chef, and I had to go out, even though I was just a proper junior. And the guy said that it's one of the best dishes he's ever had. And I that day, kind of like the penny dropped, where I realized, wow, maybe this is something that I can do, because at that stage I was still searching and not understanding where I'm going to go in life, And that was when I realized that maybe I just have a little bit of talent to do this. And so I'm gonna pursue it. So that's how I started in this game.
Fantastic. Reuben, do you remember how old you were when that tourist called you?
I was 18 years old. Yeah.
Okay. So one could really say you've had a life in the kitchen too. Maybe not quite Coco's life, being born in the kitchen.
No, I wasn't exactly born in the kitchen like Coco.
Karen, I feel like I could, after our numerous conversations of late, I feel like
I lost you.
I could tell your story, but would you please share with us a formative experience that made you...
Oh gosh, I'm losing you slightly. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So could you share a formative experience that made you realize that this...
Yes, I can. Unlike all my friends over here, I actually came to food quite late because my mum sort of dominated the kitchen. And I was not the girl that was like baking carrot cake for the cake sales, But as I grew up, and when I was a student, actually, I kind of realized, wow, if you bake hot bread and you have lots of butter with your hot bread, you all of a sudden have lots of friends. And so I started realizing that, oh, if I make nice things, the people gather. And so I began to kind of realize that, yeah, this is possibly a way I could do things. And then again, I came to food because I kind of had to. I ended up working in the States for 4 years during the Clinton administration. It's a long story, but I was taken a chef there who trained at the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, sort of took me under his wing and kind of must thought that I had a bit of potential, and then sort of threw me in at the deep end, and like, we're going to poach the salmon for the president of Nigeria. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I had to try and apply all the things that my mom had tried to teach me about, like put the baking powder in last for the fairy cakes, cream the butter and sugar properly, get the onions to a good color before you add these other things. And so I sort of tried to remember all the things that she taught me, and I sort of basically I'm a sponge. I assimilate things. I'm a great assimilator of things. And so my folks were lovers of delicious things, and they taught me about what was good. And so I sort of knew about what was delicious. They also traveled quite a bit, and so we had all these interesting flavors in our house growing up, which was, I think, quite unusual for the time. But even something as simple as kind of hot Portuguese rolls on a Sunday, or consisters down the road, that's good. That's the good stuff. I kind of fell into food. I ended up even my catering career started when people kind of sort of heard that I could cook. And one day, one of my best clients called and said, would you make lunch for me and my 12 girlfriends in my beautiful house in Constantia with my acres of iceberg roses? I said, yes, I think I can do that. And I just was winging it, you know, again, assimilating all the things that I picked up on my travels and from my time in the States. And they thought that this is what I did for my living, and I was completely winging it, you know. And then next thing I was kind of cooking kind of springbok pies with, you know, stuff from the Karoo, and I was doing, you know, the 80th birthday party and the rugby boxes and the whatevers, and I was just working, you know, I at the time I had no husband and kids, so I was just working long hours on my feet and kind of really just winging it the whole way, assimilating what I could. And I think my final sort of epiphany was on the first day I opened my shop, The Kitchen. And our idea was to put leftovers from the catering that we were doing for the schmancy people, and put leftovers in the fridge in the hope that, you know, maybe 8 people might come past and pick up something. And but we had nonetheless a very nice display of salads because we wanted to show off, you know, because it's the first day. And the first guests in my restaurant were from a gallery across the way, and she was kind of tearful, and he was comforting her, and I realized in that moment, this is not the time to show off with the salads, you know, this is the time to administer a lemon square and a cup of tea. And I think my world just sort of opened up there because I realized I am destined to serve people. It makes me happy to be able to meet people's needs in that way. And so, you know, I have gotten to do that every day for the last 11 years, you know. I kind of realized I could touch people and I could connect with people through my food. I'm kind of like reaching for them, you know, reaching for what would be the most pleasing. And I had the luxury and the leisure from the setting that I had to be able to do that every day, something new and creative and delicious, and then have all these people to love, you know, in this way. It was quite wonderful. So, yeah, does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes. Thank you. So thank you for setting the scene for all of us. I mean, all of you have such different, rich stories to tell. And I think that's also what makes you all very compelling and interesting to chat to. Now, I am very aware that we have not very much time, and there are lots of pressing things that everybody wants to know, and I think that you perhaps want to know from each other as well. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is to perhaps just dive straight into it, right? We're living under a pandemic. It has become, for want of a better term, the new normal. And so we navigate these uncharted territories. It has been extremely difficult for many of our businesses. I know, having spoken to all of you, most of you, to some extent over this time, there are many worries that the public may not be aware of or may be aware of. Things like your overheads, your staff, you know, what's going to happen next? Are you really opening the restaurant? How is the delivery system working? Do we amp it up? You know, what happens next? So I would like to know, you know, your perception, your experience. I'm going to throw you all in the deep end of how the government has approached the pandemic as far as the restaurant industry is concerned. So I know we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but if briefly all of you could just give us, you know, what's your core feeling right now, having processed things through the months? Coco, would you like to start?
Okay, so when all this came, okay.
Coco, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't see you. I wonder if your video is perhaps switched off.
If you bring it back,
Okay, anyway, continue, right.
Can you see me now?
I can see you.
So when all this pandemic arrived, okay, nobody was ready for anything. Okay, not even like clothes. Nobody will ever have enough money, if I can say, to sort something like this, especially for a restaurant that just started. We will start to kind of break even, pay the loan, etc. And it all happened at the same time. So we had to close down the restaurant, like everybody. We had, there were some government funds that were there to help assist the restaurants, okay? But even that little that came, which was certainly not enough to help everybody, okay? I did not have access to it because you had to be 100% South African, which I'm not. So that I couldn't ask for that. So we had to lay off all the staff. We had to start now negotiating with the landlord because it's also his business. He doesn't have any income. We don't have any income. I cannot afford to pay the levies, the running costs, the rates and taxes, all that with zero income. Okay, and keep some, some costs. Try to even electricity. We could not just close and close everything and then switch everything off. You can't. You have a wine cellar which is there. You have a cold room, freezer. Now actually we decided to even unplug the freezer because it's been too long anyway. So there's nothing which is good for us to stay in the freezer. So let's just unplug and clean everything. And that's how we had to do. And at the moment, when we're going to start, which we don't know yet when it is, okay? Because our business model have never been for to do takeaway deliveries. It's not the type. We're trying to do, since we've been allowed to do outside catering, to go in people's home. People invite us, we go and cook because people continue celebrating birthdays. Some have done weddings. So we go there, do the food as an outside catering, but it's certainly not enough. Okay. So when we're gonna start, when it's gonna allow full capacity, okay, we're gonna start with the balance sheet showing a negative number for above R1 million easily. You understand? And you're not gonna even start at full capacity or even at a third of capacity. Okay, so we as a restaurant, we will have to go and try and borrow money to start afresh. We're going to have to restart a new business. Okay, you start with a negative balance sheet. You're gonna have to get some extra money to buy new stock. Okay, yes, you're gonna start maybe with less amount of staff, but during all this time, you have a landlord saying, it's fine, I understand your problem, it's okay, I'm going to give you a discount of 30% or 40% of your rent. But how are we going to survive with, even if we give you need to pay 10% of your rent, but that 10% you had no income in the last 4 months. Where are you getting that money from? You understand? That's the challenge that we are facing. And to be honest, at this point, I don't know. I have not found a solution, okay, to reopen, to do a proper reopening of the restaurant.
So I think the conversation that's happening on a global scale is certainly started off the initial question, Karen, you were part of that very first panel we held where we looked at the state of dining. And, you know, the initial question was, are we actually going to have restaurants the way we knew them until we get a vaccine? And as you're explaining, Coco, I'm thinking that even if one had a vaccine, how can you operate in the same way if you've got to take care of the losses, you know, that you've incurred in addition to the staff costs? So again, Portia, would you kindly weigh in here? In your opinion, how do you think the government has dealt with this in terms of assisting the restaurant industry and providing information? What's your experience been there at the Africa Cafe?
I don't think the government has helped at all. I totally don't think they have just considered how tough it is as restaurateurs in this period, and even the whole transformation. In fact, they haven't thought about the transformation of the country, bring it back, or a new normal at all, as far as I'm concerned. They've left me as a restaurant still closed. I'm only going to be opening up in January. We are not set up to do deliveries, and you know, unfortunately, when people where I am in Cape Town see or hear African food, they've got a certain philosophy about it. They have an idea what it is. They haven't really been there, and so it's not food they're used to, or they think they are not used to it. You know, as a restaurant, I've always been branded as touristy. Very few, my customers are not Cape Townians. My customers, because the people who value what I do and see what I do, are people that come in and have traveled throughout Africa or have traveled the world and have had all the other cuisines that are on the menu here. And they say, but we've come to Africa, we want to have something different. So as a restaurant, we are just left totally out in the dark. As long as airports are still closed, as long as borders are still closed, there's no movement. As a restaurant, we're closed. We just have to be closed. What does help us is that we had, as a restaurant that's almost 28 years old, we've had a couple of setbacks. We've had recessions happen. We've had many things happen. I mean, when we moved into our restaurant, the first year into the town restaurant, that was in our 8th year, but was our first year in town, we had a fire that burned down our restaurant. So we've gone through a lot of crises, and that fortunately has made us live very frugally as business people, always expecting something to happen in an economic crush, you know. And also we lived through the whole apartheid stages. We lived through the stages where there used to be, I don't know if you remember, there used to be like Nkata and the ANC fighting in Reuben and here. We've lived through shotguns. When we were in observatory, there was like fighting going on. And so we've lived through quite tough times, which have made us very careful in how we handle whatever profits we've had. So we haven't gone to government for any funding, because we just don't think what they were giving people, because a lot of our chefs, because of the way I also train chefs, I train chefs that come from all over Africa. It's important for me. So some of them are not South Africans. They couldn't go and get the UIF. So we had to make sure that they can still support their families, because we have to look after them. So no, I don't think the government has thought of us at all. And if there's a new way to do things, we've got to change things. As for me, in this realm, we can't go back to the old. You know, I don't know if banks are even going to be, Chef Coco's talking of bank loans. I don't know if banks are wanting to give to restaurateurs. I read an article.
They should.
Yes. I read an article yesterday of a lady in a restaurant in New York, and she said, I don't know if restaurants are going to open again. I don't know if people are ready to go to restaurants, because people who are really fearful of COVID says, you know, how far am I going to be sitting from the person that I haven't seen? I haven't seen. It's okay to go to a restaurant with people that you have actually, that you live with. You can sit and you can chat with them. But if somebody you haven't seen, you've got to sit 1.5 meters away from that person. So the reason we go to restaurants is to socialize, but we won't be able to socialize with people sitting meters away from us. And no, with no alcohol at the moment, we're not even allowed to serve. The restaurants that are open aren't allowed to serve alcohol. I mean, a lot of restaurants make their money from the markups in alcohol. We don't want to overcharge people, because as it is, Cape Townians, and I'm looking at the restaurants right now in Cape Town, the majority of them, even if they do think most of their customers are local, actually their majority of customers are foreigners. Cape Town, the greater Cape Town, whether you had a restaurant that was serving African food or having a restaurant in Franschhoek like Reuben, you have a lot of foreigners. So foreigners are important for us. Cape Townians themselves, they are doing they're cooking from home, they're doing the takeaways, they're learning to cook at home. Besides, they themselves have very little money, because they also have businesses that have been shut down or that are not as lucrative as it used to be. So it is for me, a period that right now means we, all of us, especially people of color, we need to band together. We need to come together and look and help each other and look for a solution in a different way that we used to do before. So we cannot go forward with the same mindset of how it was always been or how we see restaurant. We really need to kind of throw that old idea out of the box and come up with a new set of building blocks and new ideas.
So speaking of which, look, I know I've got so many things that I want to ask all of you, and we have around about 15 minutes to cover everything. So, you know, Reuben, can I also
go on longer, Ishay? It doesn't matter. People can stay if they want to stay.
Yes.
Can I put you on the spot there, Reuben? In terms of, you know, what the government has done, have you, I mean, has it assisted you in terms of your approach to running the restaurants and what your current steps are?
No, I don't think. I'd be surprised if anyone in the hospitality industry would say that the government really assisted us. I think I will be, you know, I can understand, like Coco said in the beginning, this is like really unprecedented. I can't think that many governments in the world would have known how to deal with this thing properly. But I think in our case, it's not so much the assistance in terms of, you know, giving us funding, because we obviously know that there just isn't enough of that. But just in terms of the communication and better planning around how to assist, and just giving us a bit more sort of, you know, continuous communication, so that we at least know where we stand, would have been a bit more helpful. I mean, I think most of us obviously are concerned for our own families, but also our people that work for us, that's our families as well. And so we're so concerned for them, because they also have dependents that we don't even know how far that goes back. And now you're left in a position, and if you watch the TV, the way ministers are speaking towards employers is as if we are in positions to be able to just keep our staff on and keep on paying them, even though we have no money coming in, and they make us look like villains. And for me, that was disappointing. You know, I was thinking, why are these guys making us to look like villains? We are really trying our best to keep things going, and to at least, I mean, I almost emptied my restaurant just to give food parcels to my staff and to just sort of do something, you know. But so from that point of view, I thought it was really badly dealt with. I mean, still, you know, we are left in the dark, and then all of a sudden we get a message. Okay, the peak is, we haven't reached the peak yet, but you can open your restaurant. I mean, you know, for us that was also, we're like, what? You know, we would have preferred them to say nothing, and so that because we've made up our minds, we're going to stay closed till September. We can try and sort of hold out until then. And I think our staff also somehow got used to it. I think once they realized that, you know, because we still try to give them almost put some money into their accounts before the TERS money goes in, because that was also a lottery. We didn't know who gets what, when they get it. And then the next month we couldn't do it because we still didn't get that money back. We thought we can just roll it over every time, you know, and it was, so, you know, those things it was very disappointing. Now you go to insurance companies. So some of us were insured for this thing. These guys have just decided, no, they're not going to pay. So now we have to jump through hoops just to, after we've paid all those installments, just to kind of like get to a point we get something back. And the government are they completely mum on this issue as well. So, I mean, that I don't understand. But I think, I don't want to, you know, again, we can, I think we all go over into survival mode. I think restaurateurs especially, I think we're some of the toughest people out there. I think we can survive. Even if we, like in your case, Karen, you close, but I know that doesn't mean much to me. It's sad and I feel sorry, but I know you're gonna sprout up somewhere again and start over, and I can see that happening because we can survive. We know how to survive. And I think a lot of us, in terms of making that mental shift, it maybe took me a while, but I think now I'm in that position where my mind, I'm thinking I'm in survival mode. I'm not thinking that I'm a victim. I'm trying to think, how can I weather this storm and how can we start again once we're allowed to do it? And so my mind has shifted away from blaming anything or government or whatever. But yet I think we still need to get after the insurance companies, because they've been, they can't get away with this. This is thuggery. They shouldn't get away with this.
We need to join a class action, Reuben. We need to join a class action. There are some things like that out there. Can I just say how refreshing it's been to listen to all of you? Because I'm here nodding my head, going, yes, I know. Okay, Coco, Portia, Reuben, I'm with you exactly there. And you know, it's so refreshing because I'm sure all of you have heard from people who are not in our industry. And they're looking at us with big eyes like, the government said that you can open, so why aren't you opening? With no idea of what it costs to open the doors of a restaurant, to stock your cold room, to bring in people from Atlantis and Khayelitsha and Delft, you know. People have no idea of the risks involved, the kind of protocols you may need to do, and the fact that like our businesses are level 0 businesses. We have to see people. We have to see people behind their masks. We have to feed them lips on forks, plates, hands. You know, we're not you know, we are, let's not go on to sanitary, but you know what I'm saying. It's, and people are, you know, even our landlords are saying, well, you can trade, so I'm going to charge you, you know. And like as for many of you, you know, let's be honest, the delivery and takeaway business may be fine for some people if you're like really small and 2 people, you know, working out of the back of a garage or a small establishment. But for most of us who are accustomed to volume, and this is kind of a whole challenge to the restaurant industry too, because we sit as restaurateurs all the time with needing to fill our restaurants to 100% capacity all the time. You know, at my shop, I would see 100 to 150 people a day. I would swallow a lot of costs to keep the people coming. Even, you know, I'm charging 65 Rand for my salad box, but I should be charging 80 Rand for my salad box. But I know people are going to go, hey, it's just vegetables, you know. And so we've been, I'm sure you guys can relate too. I've kind of been swallowing costs just because we need those volumes. So when you're dropping from like 100, 150 people to 15, maybe 30 people if you're lucky, because now you don't have tourists, you don't have the production companies, you don't really have private catering anymore. People can't gather for things. So when you don't have that volume, what do? So we have to figure out, how do we feed people nicely, affordably, nutritiously, and in a way that is going to work. And so, yes, Portia, Reuben, Coco, all my friends, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this?
So I'm just want to interject here because, you know, I think what Reuben also said about, you know, our realistic expectations of the government assisting. I mean, if you look at it, our needs in this country are so bad, and the general ones are so basic. So I think most restaurateurs didn't necessarily expect a large amount of money from the government that was going to assist. But I know that you have issues with the insurers, you have issues with landlords, perhaps with maybe investors, with partners. You know, I've asked as many restaurateurs and chefs as I have been able to, if we go to, you know, being able to open, as the government has said, okay, do this, but these are the precautions we would like you to take. Would you open? And I also find myself in a conflicted position, because I know I would not go into to sit in the restaurant. I support the industry. Many of my colleagues support the industry. If you guys, maybe you saw the report that came out in the New York Times a day or two ago, the restaurant critic Tejal Rao has done a whole report, and here you have somebody whose bread and butter is visiting restaurants, and she documents why she will not go. She will not go in a restaurant right now, even though I think in Europe and the US it's far more open than it is here, and for various reasons. And one of her core interests and reasons being the safety of staff in the restaurant, you know. So my long-winded little monologue there was to ask that if everything was ready to go right now, would you open? And I think, you know, you have been put in that position, haven't you? Because your landlords are saying, well, you're allowed to go, why aren't you opening? Coco?
I will go, but I need to see, to have the permission on the government side to be able to sell alcohol, because we know here, I mean, in our industry, okay, I will say a good 60%, if not more, of the profit is made by the profit generated by the alcohol, okay? If you don't have that, okay, and then you're gonna have fewer people coming in, okay, and then you're gonna open, like our restaurant, okay, it's only from the evening. During the day, because we don't have a passing trade, we don't have that type of passing trade, so we only start trading in the evening. So if in the evening you can't trade, people are gonna be scared of going out, okay, which I understand. I'm also maybe scared of going out in places that I do not control, okay. So I don't think, okay, but I respect the people who have taken the decision to reopen, okay, but I don't think it's safe for ourselves, for our customer, for our staff, okay, to open at this point. Because yes, you're gonna create all the safe environment in your restaurant, sanitize, even put everybody in his own bubble if you want, but what happened to your staff that have to get there? How do they get there? You understand? How do they arrive there? What security or attention they pay to the hygiene where they? So it's really tricky, and all that while you know that you are not going to be making any money. It's going to be costing.
So there's so
money that you don't have anymore.
There are multiple variables, of course, involved when one just thinks about hygiene. So I know, Portia, that you are set to open in January. Reuben, you've mentioned to us that your goal is September. That has been the strategy that you have taken. And we had a brief conversation. You also said that, you know, what about the staff, the safety of the staff? It was the first things I recall you mentioning, the safety of the staff. And you also mentioned that should somebody contract COVID in your restaurant while dining in your restaurant, imagine the publicity after that. So, Reuben, if you could just take us to September, what are you hoping will happen there, apart from wanting a vaccine, of course?
But you see, Ishay, that's the problem. We don't even know what that's going to look like. Yeah. You know, everything at the moment is kind of so fluid, and things change so quickly. I can say now that, you know, I mean, we have also another restaurant that does breakfast and sort of light lunches. And so we thought, okay, we can open there. But if you read in the newspapers, then, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's a good idea to be going to restaurants. So, I mean, like I mentioned to you, I would rather not do it now and see how it goes. And then we'll decide in 2 weeks' time. So we'll be making decisions every week, every 2 weeks, after a month, in terms of what we're going to be doing. So September might look, you know, I mean, September is one of those months where the flowers comes out again and things start to, you know, renew. So I hope it's the same for our industry. So it's a bit of wishful thinking in a way. But yeah, I think it's still the same in terms of precautions and all of that. That goes without saying. But it's definitely not going to be the restaurant that it used to be, you know, pre this whole thing. I mean, I'm already talking to people taking up certain spaces, like, you know, where we definitely have less seats, whereas before we could do, let's say, 90 people. Even, I mean, September, even if they start to allow us to do more people, I prefer to then still do, let's say, 50 people. We're going to have to limit the days that we trade, even in September. I'm not going to be open 7 days a week. We'll probably be open 4 days a week. And then have a space where people can maybe walk in, buy something and go. You know, so we're going to have to trial that and see how that goes. But it's definitely not going to be the same as it used to be, you know, before. But I mean, and at the same time, we're still learning and trying to understand what else can we offer, because you can't make two sudden movements at the moment because someone else in New York is doing it, or in London. I mean, it's completely different here.
So what I'm gathering from it, speaking to as many chefs as I can, keeping in touch with those who are running things from the very small catering, you know, from market and catering, to those who have closed fine dining restaurants. I mean, there's this uncertainty, of course, but, you know, I think that now has been a great time for reflection, and that's what I'm getting. I'm getting a lot of responses where people are saying that I'm also looking back and thinking about, why did I start this in the first place? And, you know, we all started the conversation with all of you reflecting on those formative memories. I've heard people also speak to me about the idea of, you know, I've had an opportunity to reevaluate the kind of food I want to be known for. And maybe what it is, you know, what I have been doing that's been paying the bills isn't actually, you know, how I want to see myself at the end of my story. So I think there has been a lot of time for reflection. I imagine it's not like all of you have had oodles of time to sit around and just contemplate, because you're trying to keep things afloat, you're trying to pay your staff, and you're trying to also be the oracles that we expect you to be and tell us what's going to happen in the future. You know, so on that note, I must ask this question. There have been some chefs who have been pushing for the opening, and they've been very vociferous about that. So our intention here is not to mention the names of the chefs doing that, but for us to imagine how they think or what their strategy will be if that was the case. So there have been some chefs who have said, you know, just let the alcohol go, fill our restaurants, I'm supporting X amount of people, I just want to go, ready to go. How do you imagine that they are perhaps in a space mentally more ready than you are? Because my understanding is that if they're saying that, then they must have some strategy, right? In which to keep the public safe, to keep themselves safe as well. So we have reached our time, really, but I would like to invite anyone who would like to weigh in on that to do so, please.
I
Well,
think, sorry, for me, it's very clear. I'm not here to judge, or I don't even judge people who want to rush stuff, okay? You still have people in every industry who believe that, you know what, there is no COVID, okay? This is all fabricated or whatever, it's story. They should just ask us, we have to go in, we're gonna have, or you're gonna get COVID, and then yeah, it's fine. Instead of die of hunger, I'd rather die with COVID and whatever. I'm not judging. People think like that. What can I do? But what I can talk is just for me. It's things I'm not ready to take that type of risk. And it's a risk that for me does not make sense to rush, because you're gonna rush like in other countries they've done, okay? And then now they have to go back to level 5. You understand? And what was the point? Do I think that maybe we've got to lock down too quickly, too fast? Yes, no, but who could know? Who knew that the lockdown was not for 2 weeks? We all got prepared, say, okay, it's fine. I told all my staff, okay, let's meet 1st of April, okay? We're all gonna start. Well, it was the biggest April Fool's joke that I thinking that on the 1st of April, we'll all go back to normal. So I think it's gonna take time to recover anything. We just have to be creative in what you can do and how we can do to survive. All of us, as Reuben said, we have kicked into survival mode big time. There is no other possibility. It's surviving. How do I pay my bills up to September or even further, where the peak is gonna be, and then, that's the only thing we can do.
Would anyone else like to weigh in on an imaginary conversation with the chefs who are desperate to open and very vocal about that?
I'll say quickly, I think I respect the guys that want to open up now. I think it's for a combination of reasons. It will never, even if we wait another 2 or 3 months, we'll feel the same way we feel now then. I think whoever wants to open and do the right thing, and whoever then wants to go and frequent those restaurants, you know, we are now at a stage where we're either going to have to wait till we get a vaccine, or we're going to have to try and live with this thing in some way and take our precautions and make our own choices to say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to take the chance and I'm going to try and be safe when I do it. But we can't stay in lockdown forever also, you know. So I do respect these guys. I hope that their approach is to keep everyone safe. But the ones that I know that I've opened, I spoke with them and they've got their reasons, and I think we've got to respect it. And I think, you know, if it happens, like I mentioned, Ishay, if something happens in my restaurant where they can trace it to me, I just don't want that to happen to me now. And I've got a feeling that I just want to wait till after the curve, whenever that is, then I'll feel a bit more comfortable to get this going again. And like you guys said, it's not that easy just to restart a restaurant. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. It takes money. And you can't just be sitting there and waiting for people to come. You know, you got to be sure that, oh, yeah, no, people are going to come if you start opening up. I want to see the demand before I'm just going to open up.
You know, we have a bit of a South African thing, I think, where we think if we just work hard enough, if we just keep working at a thing and we just keep going on, everything will be okay in the end. But we're going to have to be really considered and clever about the way that we actually do it. And we really kind of have to let go of our old expectations of how things were. This is a complete renovation. People talk about pivoting. There's no pivoting. You have to sort of let something die, grieve it away, and start a new thing. I mean, my first instinct is, let's go outside. Let's have large, long tables with lots of people outside, in the street, on rugby fields, in parks, you know, and Portia and I do something on Heritage Square, or we do, you know, I come visit Reuben in Franschhoek and we do something in the street, you know, because it's the open air, you know. And
I wanted to add,
I'm just kind of thinking of like, you know, we're going to have completely different thinking about the way we're going to move forward. And my personal feeling is that we're really going to be needing each other in like 8 months. And in 9 months' time is when we're going to need money. and we're going to need resources, and we're going to have to look at all the things that we've learned about what we've been doing wrong and what has to be, how it has to be different. We have to dream up the new. We have to dream the new into being. And we have to keep this conversation going now and kind of tally all our learnings. But my personal instinct is kind of 8-9 months from now, when we're trying to crawl out of our debt even more and trying to start something new, is when we're really going to need help. That's when the government can come in, to be honest with you. That's when they can come in. Not with loans that we have to repay quickly, but with something very real, you know. Right now, the only help we've really gotten is like loans through banks, and they're just basically loans. More credit that we don't want, you know. Credit is the thing we want to run a mile from. Nobody should give us credit. You know, we're looking at here from the cash economy, growing the vegetables out of our gardens, right, Portia? Like, that's what we're actually looking at. And that's how we kind of have to be thinking, changing the parks into vegetable gardens, you know, really cultivating all that beautiful land in Franschhoek, you know, making market gardens, etc., etc. That's the way we need to be thinking. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
So I think that we're also in a moment in the culture where, as I mentioned earlier, it is really the time for reflection, but also I think it's a very, very valuable time, in the sense that whatever's going to happen in the future, the seeds of those things are being sowed right now. We may not feel it exactly, but however our restaurants are going to be. And if anything, it could be the perfect time for us to dismantle systems that we have been dissatisfied with, that have not necessarily served us, that do not necessarily speak to our communities, you know. And there was a long stage which we thought that fine dining in its most elite form was untouchable, that it would never, you know, it would be something that you need to bow down to a million times before you're let in. And now when you look at it, in one fell swoop, everything from the takeaway to Noma has fallen to its feet. I take no pleasure in saying that at all. But what I'm saying is, in the local context, in the South African and the African context, my feeling is, if ever there was a time for us to redefine, regroup, rethink everything from the finance to the food on the plate to the people working in those kitchens, it is now. I know that's a lot of pressure to place on chefs, but I'm hoping that entire communities will be working and mobilizing with you. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's joined us in this chat today to keep these conversations going, if there's any way that SAPOC at the table can help you to assist with connections. I know it's one of the things that gives us great pleasure, and certainly myself. We are here to assist and to help you. Thank you so much for your time. I know we've all gone over. I know there are a lot more things we can chat about, and I've taken notes. So thank you, everybody. Coco, Portia, Karen, Reuben, thank you for your time. Thank you to the people who've come to listen in on this conversation. It will be available on SAPOC at the Table's YouTube channel. So on that note, have a great lunch, everyone, if you haven't eaten already.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Cheers, Coco.
Cheers, Reuben.
Bye, Reuben.
Bye, Karen. Hope to see you
Bye,
soon.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Portia.
Bye. Bye.